I was all ready for a philosophical discussion. And it actually was really, really good, right? So fun. Now we're going to go back to trauma. So sorry. So does anybody remember anything I talked about yesterday? Yesterday. Okay. What do you remember? Okay, and that was Dan Siegel. So he was talking about the kind of foremost neuroscientist, Dan Siegel, that has a little bit of Buddhism. That's who, the only thing you'll ever remember that I talked about was like screaming with my fingers. So we talked about stress, right? We talked about burnout, secondary trauma, what are the cues. We're gonna give a little overview of that and then get into self or soul care. So we're only as good for our clients as far as we're willing to go. I think about this in terms of hiking. I don't want to go on a hike with someone that's never been on that trail if I'm new to the area. So like around here, it'd be fascinating to go climb up the mountains over there. I would want to go with someone that is familiar with those mountains, that has been up and down and knows what we need, how long, when we need to start, will the weather turn, all of those type of things. I think for us as Christian therapists, we want to be doing the practices that we're going to be asking our clients. I wouldn't want you to ever ask anybody to go places you're not willing to go yourself or haven't gone yourself. So that means we need to be constantly working on living rightly, flourishing, taking care of ourselves, not as a function of kind of narcissism of like, oh, it's all about me, but it's like we flew here, right? And they always do the belts and like, there's the exits. And they also talk about the oxygen mask. And the first time I ever flew, I was confused by why they said, put it on yourself first, right? So I asked the flight attendant, because I just like interacting. And come to find out, when they're teaching, they don't like interaction. I raise my hand, so why do we put it on ourselves first? And she's like, I'll talk to you later, like we have to finish this. And then came and talked to me, and it's like, well, you want to have oxygen so then you can help your children and the people around you. So you put it on yourself first so then you can be helpful to those around you. It's the same thing in terms of self-care for the therapist. It's good for you, but it's also good for your clients. And so we're going to talk about how we take care of ourselves, and especially around areas of extreme stress. So first is good diagnosis, right? Of like, if you feel like your stripes are falling off, you're probably stressed, maybe traumatized, need to kind of pay some attention. So that's kind of how I feel at times. So there's different stress at different points in your career. My doctoral degree is in child development, so I think about everything through a developmental lens. And it's not static, but we're moving across time, and there's going to be different tasks at different times. And some of them are cumulative, other of them are unique to the moment. So grad students, we have a few grad students here. You're in the impossible situation in terms of stress. Congratulations. You're supposed to practice good self-care, but do a good job on every assignment. Make sure you do all the readings, turn in your assignment on time, do the research, see the clients, maybe work a little bit so you can pay for food and rent, have some time for yourself and a nice life, right? So you all can do that. Right? I used to have hair and was a little thinner before grad school. So stress can also cause cortisol increase and these type of things. So if you don't want to end up looking like me, you should probably learn how to stress manage. Early career, how many early careers do we have? Yep, couple. So starting a practice, a career, thinking about significant relationships, whether it's starting a family or living in a community in terms of intimate relationships, expectations, time pressures, and recovering from the previous developmental stage. I get to bill for what I do. I've been working for free for like 3 years and seeing lots of clients, and now I get to have some money. And it might even be stressful, like collecting money, because depending on your site, you do a lot of practice seeing clients, but not necessarily billing. And then all of a sudden, this idea that it's a business and I have to do a transaction in addition to being a therapist can be stressful, even though it's something that is good for you. Mid-careers, raising families, finances, running a practice, seeking tenure if you're a professor, all the family life cycle stages, complete your continuing education requirements so you can stay licensed or certified or registered, all of these fun things. And these are just our professional stressors. We're not even getting into someone that is taking their own life or has taken their own life. And when that happens, and it probably will for you, it depends on when it happens in the developmental sequence. So we'll remind me to tell you the story of Will if there's time, and we can talk about how do you navigate a client dying that you're working with and their family. So Jesus is our guide for self-soul care. And I love this passage in Mark. We're going to look at Mark 3 and Mark 6 chapters, and there's a lot going on here. So in Mark 3, Jesus has just healed someone on the Sabbath. So he's in the synagogue, right? He's in the place of worship with all the religious folk, and he's healed somebody. And now they want to stone him, right? So in a place of worship with religious people, he heals, but he does it that's counter to the faith tradition of the time. A little bit of stress, right? This is my people, this is my community, I'm living out my integration, and now I'm persecuted for it. And so then Jesus withdrew to the lake. He and his disciples, they're like, let's jet. And they go to the lake, and as they're going to the lake, a bunch of people see him follow him because he just healed somebody's withered hand in church. And they're like, hey, we want to hang out with that dude. And he's trying to get away and have a little downtime to manage the stress of that. When they heard all about what he was doing, they came from all over. Because of the crowd, and he saw what was happening, he told his disciples, go get the boat ready. Go prepare for a break, because this is going to be a lot. And he kept the crowds away from the disciples. So we see some self-care and care for those that are under our supervision here. We move on in this, and we see the crowds follow him. He's appointing the 12 now here, and so seeing that, oh, there's a lot to do, we can't do it all on our own. We need community. And we see Jesus appointing the 12 that he has of saying, we're going to work together. We're going to be in this situation, this ministry, this stress together. And then we jump over to Mark 6. And in Mark 6, we have the whole passage about being a prophet in your own land, a prophet without honor, right? He's in with his people, and just they're like, isn't that Joseph? Isn't that the carpenter's son? Why is everybody getting all excited about him? He's just a carpenter. And so totally getting shade thrown at him in his own town. And then we see this, that the apostles gather around Jesus, report to him all that they have taught and all that they had done. Then, because so many people were coming, and you see this theme, right, of that they're meeting, they're talking, they're planning, crowds come in, they minister, and then they take a break, or they try to, and sometimes there's intrusion in that. And so Jesus says to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. That's the disciples. But many who saw them leaving recognized, ran around the lake, tried to get ahead of them and anticipate where they were going. Jesus landed, saw the large crowd, had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them. And as he taught them, then we jump down to, that was the feeding of the 5,000. That's sandwiched in between here. So all those people come. They were planning on kind of getting away and having a little downtime. Now you have 5,000 people, 5,000 men, probably actually a lot more people that you feed, you do this, and then immediately after they gathered up the 12 baskets of the leftovers, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. He's like, okay, go take a break. I got this. And they went out. Now the rest of the story is they're out there, the seas kind of start pushing against them. They're rowing, they can't get back into shore. Jesus has gone to the mountainside to pray by himself. He gets down the shore, sees them that they're distressed, and that's when he walks out to Peter. Peter falls in. So it's really fascinating to see the sequence of events here in terms of Jesus's ministry, Jesus caring for large crowds, the stress of that, and the need for solitary, need for quiet time, need for separateness, and how sometimes the disciples, even trying to do that, got themselves in a world of hurt and needed Jesus to help them self-care. So that's my best exegesis. I'm glad that, is there any theologians in the room? Perfect, so that's exactly how it should be exegeted. It's how things that are jumping out, truths that are jumping out to me. So here's examples of Jesus's guide for us in work-life balance. He withdrew from work at times. He spent time with friends. He chose the friends that were around him. First the 12 and then the 3, right? So there were different levels of intimacy. So he had friends and then he had really close friends. And it's something for us to think about, because sometimes we feel like, oh, we have to be that level of intimate, that level of connection with everybody. And Jesus gives us a model of, well, there was support, and there was support at different levels of intimacy, different levels of connection and closeness and access to him. Jesus directed, and we have to direct our activities, kind of limit setting. Hey, go do this, I'll take care of this, and then this is what I need. I'm going to go have some quiet time. Jesus made the asks of others. He go get the boat, prepare. He wasn't doing it all himself. He depended on those closest to him for support. And you read, it says, silence, solitude, and rest are some of the words that are jumping out of the text in Mark. And lastly, prayer, right? Of that, what we see Jesus doing even more than the disciples is going to prayer as a restorative process, as a heart process for him after ministry, in exhaustion of every time we see him going to prayer. So right there is probably enough to cover today in terms of biblical guidelines for us as Jesus as a trail guide, showing us things that we need to do. But wait, there's more. Just like an infomercial, we're going to kind of cover a little bit more. Burnout. We won't spend a lot of time on this because we all know it deeply personally. We feel despondency. We feel both the despondency of our clients and maybe we feel despondency for our clients. Despondency meaning like lack of hope, hopeless. Just like, I think of this, if I had put pictures, this would be a picture of Eeyore, you know, Winnie the Pooh. Oh, bother, everything's horrible. There's no hope. Might as well quit or get divorced, right? That's despondent. Eeyore's a great despondent person or animal or figment of Christopher Robin's imagination, depending on the reality you want to embrace. We start having sleep issues, either having a difficulty falling asleep or falling asleep in session. I have seen this. Maybe I have done this, right? Especially when we had young kids. So thinking early career, just out of grad school, had 3 kids under the age of 4. And I had fallen asleep and the client woke me up and it's just like, why are you sleeping? And I wanted to say what I had read from Carl Rogers is like, well, if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't fall asleep, right? But I can't pull that off. Rogers could. That would just be mean. So I'm like, I'm so sorry. How does this occur in your life? Like, in what ways do people metaphorically fall asleep or not? And so I just I use it as an experiential moment, right? I just like, woo, quick save. But then I have to take the videotape. It was back when there was videotape. I had to take the videotape to my supervisor, put it in, and he goes, would you please press play? And I'm like, I don't wanna. And he's like, no, you really need to press play. I'm like, I really don't want it. Can I just tell you what happened? He's like, no. And so we had to look through it. And then the next week I came in for supervision and he was running late. So I was in the waiting room and I slept. And so I was waiting him to come and get me. And he came and tapped me on the shoulder. And I was like, oh, I popped up. I'm ready for supervision. He's like, no, our time is up. And I was like, what? He's like, being a supervisor sometimes is really realizing what the immediate need is and meeting the immediate need. And he's like, you look like you needed sleep. And so I told him, that was the best supervision you ever provided me. And he's like, okay, but there is some expertise. I'm like, no, I know, but that was a good model. Expensive, yeah. I still had to pay for the hour of supervision. And I'm like, here you go for my nap. But it was burnout, right? It was life stress as well as clinical stress led to my performance was being impacted and my well-being was being impacted. And I had a supervisor that knew how to interact around that. And then the following week, we talked about burnout and we talked about these things. He's like, okay, so you're not going to sleep through supervision or therapy all the time. So then how are you going to adjust things in your life, both managing stress and navigating this? And we've talked about the autoimmune. There's a study, psychoneuroimmunology, if you like that stuff, and it really looks at the relationship between stress and physiological effects on the body. And it's if you don't attend to stress, you're going to be in trouble physically, is the takeaway there. And it's going to be really more autoimmune issues, so lupus. No, opposite. If you're not managing your stress. There is optimal stress, right? Developmentally, we do need optimal stress to grow, but there's that little window between optimal stress and then, oh dear God, help me, I am crying out in lament because I've blown past that. And that's the side where we're going to have negative physical effects if we're not attending to this. So it's really important. Spiritual signs of burnout. So we talked about physiological, falling asleep. What are spiritual signs of burnout? Spiritual disconnection and isolation. And this can be about my relationship with God. God has abandoned me. So a lot of the kind of cognitive pieces, but it also is, I'm just so tired. I'm so tired of people. I'm not going to go to church, right? I'm not going to go to my small group. I'm not going to be in community. Is a sign, a spiritual sign of burnout for us as clinicians, that we're isolating. We're isolating from God. We're isolating from the body that supports us, the church, and our small groups. Religious strain, kind of this lament, major changes in spiritual meaning making. Why would a good God let such a bad thing happen to me? I don't think I can believe in God anymore. These kind of cognitive scripts that start to play first in the back of our head and then come more up into the forefront. So I don't stress about these things, but these are informative when I notice them. And it's part of this is about, are you aware of this? Are you noticing this? And realizing, oh, this might not be an existential issue. This might be a burnout issue that I'm seeing manifest in my spiritual life. Stress. So Sheriff and others talked again about what those autoimmune issues are. So rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, IBS, multiple sclerosis, Graves' disease. There's some really powerful literature that it's not causal, but there's an increased likelihood of these type of things. If we burn through the adrenaline and the cortisol, that then our bodies are going to start breaking down because it's not separate from our emotions and our spiritual life, right? There's not this disconnect of like, well, I can be healthy and still spiritually struggling or emotionally stressed struggling. It's connected, that they're mutually influencing each other. And so if you're not really attuned to your level of stress, or you're not attuned to your spiritual life, maybe you are attuned to your physical life and you notice, oh, I'm having chronic headaches, I'm having back pain, I'm having IBS. What else? So I need the medical treatment for that, but what else is going that's contributing to the likelihood that this is happening? So I don't want you to hear, oh, it's all psychosomatic, right? That there are physiological things that we need to address, and there can be psychosocial things that are contributing that we need to be mindful of and attending to. So you can read Psalm 139, it's "You're fearfully and wonderfully made." There's 5 points that King David talks about in this poem, in this song, and it's his response to a time of stress. It's a very stressful time in his life, and he writes this of oh God, I'm fearfully, wonderfully made. You're familiar with this Psalter that we have. And he's communicating, we are intimately known, not just our liver, but all of us, all the way down to when we were knitted in our mother's wombs. Or Petri dish, I mean, it's just like the very beginning of life, God has known us. That's how intimate we are with him, that he knows us that well. We don't know ourselves as well as he knows us. And we are purposefully made by him. This is what David is saying. He's having a horrible, horrible time in his life. God, you know me, intimately know me. And there's a reason that you have me in relationship with you. There's a purpose, there's a meaning making. I might not know it, but I know you have this purpose for me, and that you are omniscient, that you are in control, and that because of that, we are never alone. Even in this time of suffering, even in this stressful time, even I don't want to see another client ever, and maybe I don't want to see another human being ever, and I just don't want to get out of bed this morning. But I'm not alone, as David says. And then he gets a little bit like, hey, smite everybody and kill them and pull out their livers and make sure it's only their livers. And I mean, he gets into that at the end of the psalm. And then he goes, but judgment is only up to you, God. So help me interact. Guide me in how you want me to respond to this. So it's a beautiful psalm to help orient us in times of struggle, in times when either we're being persecuted, we're persecuting ourselves, to remember, you are known, and it's meaningful, and you're not alone, and God's in charge, and justice is up to him. He's just asking us to enter in and let the judging, let the consequences come from him. This is soothing to me in the darker moments in my life, because someone else had those horrible thoughts that I have, that I feel like I'm a bad Christian because I have them, and maybe even a worse therapist because I have them, because we're supposed to be all emotionally supportive and helpful and joining and accepting. I don't always feel that way. Some of you look horrified. Trust me, you get to the later stages as a therapist, you might feel that way a little bit. So there's three R's to remember in terms of response to burnout. Recognition, so that kind of front of mind thing we were just talking about, I have to have some attention and some recognition of what's going on. Am I attuned to my body? Am I attuned? And if I'm not, do I have friends that are speaking into this to help me with recognition? So I have a buddy, he runs the doctoral program at Wheaton, and he knows me really well. And he knows that I like to be helpful. Like, I'm willing to do anything sometimes to get what needs to be done. And he'll go, ooh, David, I think you're working from your shadow side. Like, you have good intentions, but you're gonna burn the whole Billy Graham building down just to kind of help reach that attention. You probably shouldn't set fire to the Billy Graham building. Anything with Billy Graham's name, you probably shouldn't burn down. Right? But and I'm just like, I see the injustice. I see what needs to be done. I'm willing to do it. I don't care. I've lived a good life. I can go to prison, right? All that kind of weird thought process that goes on. And he's like, hey, recognize what's going on. You're hurting, you're stressed. You're using the skills God has given you, but are you working them from a dark side for a good purpose? And is that who you want to be? And it takes someone to speak into my life so that I can recognize that's what's going on. And reverse, when you see signs of burnout, when you see signs of stress, then start to reverse the burnout by making rest, taking care, silence, solitude, get into the boat, call your people around you. Right? This is when we start using those resilient fostering things to help us pivot. But the first thing is we have to recognize that we're in that spot to then be able to ask. And asking is not a weakness. We see Jesus asking. But sometimes we feel pretty self-sufficient, or we don't want to stress anybody else out in our lives, and I'll just take it. Oh, that's nice. We don't need another martyr. We need someone that's willing to be in relationship of give and take. And part of that is what Baldwick's talk about. Good intimate relationships are to love and be loved, know and be known, serve and be served, forgive and be forgiven. And most Christian therapists are good at the loving, forgiving, knowing, and serving. They're not so good at being loved, being known, being served, being forgiven, right? We're the doers, and it's harder for us to receive. Healthy intimacy is a balance between that. Asking for love, to be known, to be forgiven, to be served, is healthy, biblically sound intimacy. Skewed on either side is problematic, right? Just receiving all the time, giving all the time, both of those are problematic. One's more socially acceptable, and one is our field, because we're in pseudo-intimate relationships with people where we're loving, serving, knowing, forgiving. And that makes you a really good therapist, makes you a horrible church, well, it makes you a really good church member. It makes you it makes you a really good partner. It makes you a really good friend, but it doesn't make you a really intimate connection. That's what we're made for. So it's seductive, and we have to reverse that. And then lastly, resiliency, recognizing it, trying to reverse it, and then continuing to build in so that you're not responding out of crisis, but you have rhythms, kind of this resilient rhythm that you've built into your life. Does this make sense? Questions? Getting tired? We have to get up and do jumping jacks. Where are you in your bodies right now? That type of thing, right? But that's an example, right? You're interacting in one way right now, in a mental, cognitive way. What's happening in your body? How are your butts feeling? Are you aware of your butt? You realize how sore it is. Those chairs aren't comfortable. You've been sitting like that for a while. It's kind of, right? But we kind of don't pay attention to it. We're not right. We're attending to other things that we're not attending to our bodies. I can attend to your bodies. Some of you are kind of getting the nods, the afternoon pre-lunch nods. And it's not disrespectful. It's, oh, this is a lot, and I'm feeling it in my body. Be aware of that. Suffering, grief. John 11:35 is where Jesus wept, right? That was my first Bible memory verse, because we got little rewards for memorizing scripture, and that's the shortest verse in the Bible. It was the easiest one to remember, so I always know that one, that Jesus wept. But it's a powerful one to think about, right? That weeping, sorrow, isn't sinful. It's actually divine. It's a normal human response to pain and suffering. This verse, chapter 11, is about Lazarus and his death, and where Jesus waited 3 days before he went and responded to Mary and Martha. And then he gets there, and Lazarus has been dead, and they're ticked. Why did you wait? What's going on? And he feels the sorrow. He feels the grief and the anger, and he cries. And the crowd responds, oh, look at how much he loved Lazarus, right? That's that scripture passage. It's okay to have normal emotional reactions, even in the therapy room. Have you been told it's okay to cry with your clients? Or you're supposed to keep a straight face? What have you been taught? Is it okay to have normal human reactions as a therapist? No. And so, yes, you don't want your stuff bleeding in, right? So I think we teach that way because we don't want you to bleed in where you create something that's not being brought in by the client. But if the client's having a response and you have a natural human response about what's going on for them, so my question would be, what are your tears telling me? Are your tears telling me, wow, you're really connected and feel with them? Or is it you're crying about something in your own life that's getting kicked up by that? Two different feedback. Like, then I would want you to be stone-faced. If it was your own grief about something else, that's countertransference, right? And that's, oh, I'm going to share this and get my needs met in the therapy process. That's an intimate relationship, but that's not a therapeutic intimate relationship. But having a normal human response to the grief of others, I don't think that's a problem. I actually think that's modeling. But it's a challenge because our field has historically been you're a blank slate. You're not reactive because it's really dangerous. I don't know how much I'm bringing in of my own stuff and how much I'm being there for the client. And so it's just safer to cut all of that off. But I think as Christians, we miss a lot of natural human divine responses we can have by doing that. So Amy Green is, she's an MDiv, and I forget her other, but she's the director of the Center for Spiritual Care at the Cleveland Clinic. It's a rather large clinic around spiritual direction and kind of verges in this ground between pastoral and professional counseling. And these are some suggestions she makes for us dealing with our own suffering and grief of accept some loneliness, be gentle with yourself, choose good company, get extra rest, have regular sleep cycle, and avoid sleep aids. Ambien is not your friend. We have a long lecture on that, but it might help you in the short term, but it's not going to help you in the long term of having a regular sleep cycle. Ambien, it's a sleeping medication. Feel all the feels. This is about having access to your emotion, but I like this terminology better. Feel all your feels. Exercise, find a rhythm to your daily spiritual life. So what Eric walked us through in terms of Lectio Divina, great kind of idea. We can look to the early church fathers and mothers in terms of spiritual disciplines that we've kind of lost over time, especially within the Protestant church, that can be helpful. And being cautious in big decisions. If you're under stress, be patient in making big life choices. Like, oh, I don't think I can't handle this. I don't think I should be a therapist. I'm going to quit. Right? Of like, get some feet, do some of these other things first before you go to making big life choices out of your stressful, burned out space. It might be needing a break, which is different than leaving the field. But I've seen that happen. I just got to such a point, I'm going to pivot. And it's usually the mid-career people. You have a lot of energy in the early grad school, early career, mid-career. You're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to do something else. Emotions and where we put them. Where do you put your emotions? Express them. Let them out. Yeah. Maybe put them in your dog. Right? I mean, yeah. But we have to play with them. When I give a child developmental lecture, I talk about, these, in the States, they're beach balls, but they're kind of big, kind of light balls that you play with at the beach, multicolored. I don't know what they're called. If you take them out into the lake and hold them under the water, how long do you think you can do that for? For me, it's 36 seconds. And then your muscles start to shake, and then it pops up hitting the head, you fall back. Your kids laugh a ton because it's really funny, but you have muscle fatigue. It is maybe like 3 ounces or, 50 grams of weight. It's very light, and yet I could only hold it under the water for 36 seconds before my muscles gave out in my arms. But if I'm patting it around with my kids, I can do that all day. Or if I'm just holding it out here, I can do that all day. It's a great metaphor for our emotions. Are we playing with them? Are we giving them? Are we interacting with them? Or are we holding them down? And the amount of effort to hold them down is so exhausting. This is a nice mental health self-care wheel. So looking at personal, professional, physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual. And kind of just a nice graphic to have to kind of quickly do a self-assessment of the domains and where you're really strong in doing self-care and where you have needs to attend to a little bit more. I'm going to wait right until you get it ready, and then no, I was just messing with you. Go ahead. And this is up on the website, the app. Lastly, so here are some good books in terms of spiritual life and rhythm. So I talked about Ruth Haley Barton with some of you. She has a great book on spiritual rhythms. The Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter. Fabulous. Just a fabulous clinician and fabulous kind of book for us. Wounded Healer by Nowen is a good integration kind of theology help. Renovating Renovation of the Heart in Daily Practice, that's Dallas Willard, kind of desert father, contemporary desert father, kind of spiritualist. And then Present Encounter. So these books are really helpful in your own spiritual life. They've been helpful in my own spiritual life, so I wanted to recommend that to you. And then just a couple of promoting Wheaton College. So I'm going to take a chance, because this is my last time with you. I've really appreciated kind of learning with you, and I'm really glad I came. So I hope the rest of the movement goes well for you.